Good morning. Let us begin. Afternoon, actually. It's a very long day. Already mispronounced the time. Okay. Any question before we start? Any concern? There is a quiz and a homework due today or tomorrow. Tomorrow. Yes.
So will the test officially be next Friday?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And we will probably have a class on Wednesday.
Okay.
So my family's appointment is at 8 a.m. in the morning in Fort Wayne. So if it goes within an hour, within 2 hours, I should be able to come back. So there will be no substitution. So if I cannot make it, so just the class will be cancelled. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with the rule. So if you are in a class and the instructor doesn't show up in 20 or 15 minutes, you leave, right? I will definitely make sure that since this is in the school, Wharton School of Business, I will tell my secretary to come to you and post an announcement if I cannot make it, if I am, let's say, stuck in a traffic or something. But I plan to come and have a sort of like a discussion about the exam on Wednesday. So let's move on. This is what we were talking about in the last class. We were making these very critical observations about the rate of return on different kinds of term structures. We were looking at mainly a comparison between short-term financial assets and long-term financial assets and how their returns appear to have some kind of relationship in the actual data. So this is an empirical observation. We made 3 empirical observations. First of all is that the interest rates all move in the same direction at the same time. There appears to be a strong co-movement. Then the second observation that we made was that when short-term interest rates are low, the long-run interest rates are going up compared to the short-run ones. So we talk about the second observation in the context of a yield curve that shows the relationship between the maturity date of the financial asset and the interest rate on that asset. So when the interest rates are low, short-term interest rates are low, you will see that as the date of maturity increases, the interest rates on the bonds sort of goes up. And you can see that in the data. When we talk about interest rates being low, we are basically talking about the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s. When interest rates were low, there appeared to be like an upward sloping part of the so-called yield curve where yield actually increased with the maturity. Now that's observation number 2. The second part of observation number 2 is that when the interest rate was short-term interest rates was very high, we see long-run interest rates start going down. That's a very interesting 2-part observation about the relationship between short-term and long-run interest rates. Now the third one, which is sort of like an innocuous statement, is that when we look at the yield curve, we always see that there is an upward sloping nature of the yield curve, meaning that people who have done actual empirical research on yield curves, although this is highly unrealistic, yield curve really doesn't exist, they find that the slope is usually positive, meaning that as maturity increases, the date of maturity increases, interest rate should go up. And it kind of makes sense, by the way, right? I mean, if I am someone who is trying to buy financial assets, I would be very sensitive to the term structure of my financial assets. The longer it takes for my assets to mature, the more interest rate I should be expecting from that. So in the last class, we looked at several hypotheses, several theories that try to explain this. The first one that we were able to pin down was this idea of expectation theory, which I renamed to be naive expectations, meaning that people really don't pay that much attention to the expectation, they just look at data. So the expectation theory argues that the buyers who are buying these different financial assets are indifferent between different maturity dates. They don't really distinguish between short-term bonds and long-term bonds in terms of their term structure. They know that they're different. One is going to mature in 2 years, the other one is going to mature in 10 years. They understand the distinction, but this time really doesn't really mean anything for them. Why? Because they somehow think these bonds are being perfect substitutes for one another. So the question is, how can a long-term bond be a substitute for a short-term bond? The answer is, the yield on the long-term bond is somehow going to come from the yield on these short-term bonds. To put it more simply, according to expectational hypothesis, the yield on the long-run bond is nothing but a weighted average of the yield on the short-run bonds. And we did some mathematical stuff in the last class where we showed that for a long-term bond such as a 2-period bond, the interest rate of the 2-period bond is just the weighted average of the 1-period bonds that you are buying today and tomorrow. We can generalize this idea. We can say that the yield on a bond that matures in period n is going to be equal to the weighted average of 1-period bonds that you are going to buy today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, till the period n. Right? Makes sense? This hypothesis, this expectational hypothesis, and I actually want to call it naive expectation hypothesis, has some really important implications. Okay? First of all, they can literally explain why the term structure of interest rate changes at different times. That's very important in a success of this theory. They explain, first of all, why the interest rates move together. That's observation number one, right? Because as you can see, if you just to remind ourselves that if I have an interest rate, interest rate on a bond that matures in period n, that actually is sum of the interest rate, and everything else is just expectational. That's 2. And you can just think about that and divide it by n. Notice that anytime the short run interest rates go up, the long run interest rates also go up, right? So they always move in the same direction, obviously. The observation that short-term interest rates and long-run interest rates move in the same direction is not an innocent or looking observation. Why? Because anytime your short-term interest rates go up, your long-term interest rates will go up if your expectation about future interest rates are also positive. Meaning that you are looking at short-term interest rates going up today, you form a naive expectation that in the future, the short-term interest rates will continue to rise. Right? So this is based on this assumption that expected interest rate would be higher in the future based on current observation. In chapter 7, we are going to call that rational expectation. Which means that our expectations are formed on the basis of what we see in the past and what we see in the present. And we form an expectation about future based on our current and our past experience. That might not always be true, right? Because if you think about like a financial crisis in 2008, right? Before the financial crisis, nobody had a clue that the financial market would crash this way, right? The same thing is true for the Great Depression, where people, even before 1 month before the stock market crashed, people had no idea that the market would crash in a dramatic ways. So obviously from our experience, we know that expectation theory doesn't make any sense, but we use it anyway because it has some theoretical underpinning. Rational expectation is a very powerful idea. Okay, it can also explain why yield curve tends to slope up when short-term rates are low and slopes down when short-term rates are high. How do you think that can happen? By the way, before we move on, are we all clear that we can literally explain observation number 2? Why do they move in the same direction, right? If you believe that interest rates is going up today, and you form an expectation that interest rates are going up in the future, your long-term interest rates are also going to go up. If your interest rate today, IT is going down today, and you form an expectation that interest rates are going to go down, your long-term interest rates are also going to go down. So there will always be a co-movement between short-term and long-term interest rates according to your expectation theory. Are we all clear on this? Let's look at the observation number 2, which is more critical. So what is observation number 2? It says when short-term interest rates are low, there appears to be a upper sloping part of the yield curve, meaning that when short-term interest rates are low, as time to maturity increases, interest rates go up. When short-term interest rates are high, the yield curve has a negative slope, which means that as the term structure increases, maturity date increases, interest rates go down. Can we explain that? Can we explain this two-part empirical observation? Okay, I guess we can, because if say that the short-term interest rates are low, you look at the data and you make the prediction that in the future short-term interest rates are also going to, I guess. So if the short-term interest rates are low, people expect that in the future they would increase. Why? This one is difficult to understand. What is easy to understand is the second one, and I want to come back to this. And please stay with me. This is a fairly complicated part of the theory which was not well explained in the book. Mishkin is a microeconomist, but somehow I don't think he explained the idea of rational expectation well to the undergraduate students. Let's start with the second observation. Let's say the short-term interest rates are exceptionally high. What do we know? What can we guess about the future? I want to sit down. I have been very busy today. So let's say the short-term interest rates are very high. Let's say the stock price of Tesla is exceptionally high. What do people expect?
Need to go down.
No matter how stupid these statements may sound, right? It actually makes sense according to rational expectations or expectation theory. Now, one has to understand that at the time when these theories were developed, economists were slowly developing this idea of trend in the data. It's a statistical concept that most of the time series have some kind of trend. And the trend in most of the macro market is that there is always expansion and there is always a contraction. Are we all clear on that? Meaning that most of the markets sort of goes through this boom bust cycle, and the perception is so strong that whenever stock prices rise up very high, people become suspicious. Whenever stock prices go down very low, people become optimistic. Are we all clear on that? And it's very difficult to really come out of that idea, because you really cannot beat data. When you look at actual data, and I can tell you from my really, really bad experience, that this is actually true. There is, regardless of how long the cycle is, there is a cycle in the financial market, that there is a boom and bust cycle. And the boom and bust cycle is so much embedded in the data that if you really analyze the data well, you seem to form this expectation that when the market is really doing well, the market is going to crash sometime. And when the market is not doing really well, market is going to pick up sometime. Okay? Makes sense. So, if the short-term interest rates are low, what are we looking at about the market? When can short-term interest rates be low? When can short-term interest rates be low? What kind of markets are we in when the short-term interest rates are low? Is that a bull market or is that a bear market?
Bear market.
It's a bear